Okay, so, we're all about diving deep into fascinating topics, right? And today, we've got one that's, I think, absolutely essential for just about everyone. It's all about how to really, truly be skillful with people. And to guide us, we're turning to the insights of Les Giblin.
You got it. That's exactly right. And what we really want to do in this deep dive is, go beyond just summarizing his book. We want to pull out like the absolute most valuable and practical stuff, the stuff you can use like right away. Whether you're heading into some huge meeting or trying to connect better with your family, or even just, curious about how to make those everyday interactions work better.
It's really pretty remarkable, the sheer range of topics Giblin covers. I mean, he touches on everything, doesn't he? From
Yeah.
like those little nuances of small talk to, how to influence people effectively. There's even, in the full guide, a self-assessment, kind of help you figure out like where you're already strong and where you might want to grow.
Yeah, and I think what's so cool about his approach is, it all boils down to some really core principles of human nature.
Yeah,
And we're going to be exploring some key techniques, things you can actually do to better understand the people you interact with and, communicate in a way that actually resonates with them. Because, skill with people is not just some like fluffy nice to have. It's really the foundation, isn't it? The bedrock of like success and happiness in every part of your life, your work, your family, your social world, all of it.
so true. All right, so let's jump right in, shall we? Like, where does Giblin even start with all of this?
Well, he starts with the fundamentals. Like step one, if you want to be good with people, you've got to understand people.
Right.
And that means seeing them for who they actually are, not who we wish they were, not who we think they should be, but who they are.
Totally. That makes sense.
And this kind of leads us to what he calls human insight #3. And he doesn't mince words here. It's this. People are mostly interested in themselves, not in you. He actually puts a number on it. He says, maybe 10,000 times more interested in their own thoughts and stuff than in yours. And of course, the same goes for you, right? 10,000 times more interested in your own stuff than in theirs.
Wow, 10,000 times. I mean, you put it that way, it kind of hits you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a little stark, but when you really think about it, I mean, about your own internal dialogue, the stuff that's swirling around in your head all the time, he's not wrong.
Right. Our own thoughts, our worries, they do tend to take center stage in our minds.
Yes, it's true.
And look, it's not about being cynical or anything. It's really about like recognizing this kind of like what's in it for me
Yeah.
factor that's always there, right? Like
Huh.
even acts of, apparent selflessness. Take charity, for example.
Oh.
Giblin points out that, even when you give to charity, often the giver gets like this primary sense of satisfaction from the act itself, right? So it's
Yeah.
not purely selfless. Really interesting. And he emphasizes that there's no need to judge this, right? Like this self-interest, it's not good or bad. It's just human. It's just how we are wired, probably throughout history and, on into the future too. So instead of fighting it, the idea is that we can work with it.
Exactly. We can use this understanding to build stronger connections.
Okay, so we've established like this fundamental truth that people are pretty focused on themselves. So like, how do we actually translate that into communication skills?
Well, that's where we get into chapter 2, how to skillfully talk to people. And Giblin's advice here is pretty straightforward, really. He says if people are most interested in their own lives and experiences, then guess what? The most interesting subject you can possibly bring up in a conversation is them.
That's so true.
He argues that, when you shift that focus onto the other person, you're going to make them like way more engaged, more genuinely interested, and they're actually going to have a more positive impression of you as a conversationalist.
It's funny because it almost feels counterintuitive. Our natural inclination is to want to share our stories, our opinions, our experiences. But he's saying, like, hold back on that a little bit.
Exactly. It's about like strategically working with human nature, not against it.
And he has some very concrete advice on how to do this, doesn't he? Like minimizing the use of certain words.
Yeah, he says, dial down the I, me, my, mine, and instead really lean into the word you. Like substitute you for I whenever you can.
The examples he gives are really great too. Like instead of saying, this is my new project, I'm really excited about it, you would say, this is a new opportunity for you that could really make a difference.
Hmm.
Or instead of, I think this information will be helpful, you would say, you will likely find this beneficial as you consider your next steps. Like it completely shifts the focus.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And what I think is fascinating is this idea of like conversational sacrifice. Like he suggests that if you're willing to like temporarily set aside the satisfaction of talking about yourself and using those I words, you're actually going to increase your ability to connect with others and influence them.
Yeah, I could see that.
It takes effort, though, right? Like consistent practice, but the potential payoff is huge.
So, okay, how do we actually do this, like in a real conversation? Because it's not as if we can just stand there silently and wait for the other person to fill the void.
Right. He talks about this too. It's about asking questions, like, steer the conversation, but do it by asking relevant, kind of personal questions. He gives examples, things like, how has your week been going? Or I heard you recently took a trip. How was that? Or even like, what are your thoughts on current event? Just getting people talking.
Yeah, it's almost like, I don't know, a subtle art form.
It is. It's about like gently guiding the conversation in a way that gets them to open up.
It really comes down to a shift in mindset, doesn't it? Like, when you're in a conversation, it's less about how you feel your contributions are landing and more about how the other person is experiencing the interaction. And when you make that conscious effort to prioritize their interests and sort of draw them out, that's when you become a truly engaging conversationalist.
100%. So moving on. Chapter 3 is all about how to skillfully make people feel important. And this one really gets at like a core human need. He says the desire to feel important, to feel recognized is a huge motivator. Like it drives so much of human behavior, good and bad.
Yeah, and it's so true. We all want to feel valued,
Yeah.
right? Like we matter. Our presence makes a difference.
Right. Giblin emphasizes that like the better you are at making people feel important, the more positive their response to you is going to be.
Makes sense. So what are some of the strategies for doing that?
Well, the first one actually goes right back to what we were just talking about, listening attentively, like really listen.
So it all ties together.
It does. And he goes into this in more detail in chapter 5. But, active listening is one of the best ways to make someone feel valued. On the flip side, when you don't listen to someone, man, they feel small.
It's true.
Another technique is to, give sincere compliments, like praise, when it's deserved, of course. But, recognize and acknowledge people's efforts.
Yeah, we all need a little bit of that, right? Validation, I think they call it.
He also talks about, like, the power of using people's names. It sounds simple, but saying, good morning name versus just good morning, it can make a real difference.
It does. It feels more personal.
Yeah. And he even suggests, pausing briefly before you respond to someone to show that you've really thought about what they've said.
That little pause can be so powerful. Like you're not just jumping in to say your piece. You've actually considered their words.
Right. And of course, he revisits the power of language here, the whole you versus I thing.
Always keeping the focus on them.
Right. And then just a couple more quick tips. Acknowledge people who are waiting for you. Like if someone's taken the time to wait, acknowledge them. And then in a group setting, make sure you're including everyone, not just the loudest voices or the people in charge.
Yeah, make everyone feel seen and heard.
Exactly. Okay, so now let's move on to chapter 4, how to skillfully agree with people. This is one where I think a lot of people might be surprised by how powerful it is.
Yeah. What's the big deal about agreeing?
Well, he kind of frames it as a skill, like a real art. He says anyone can disagree, right? But to truly agree, especially when you might think the other person is wrong, that takes wisdom. It takes maturity.
Yeah, I could see that. It's easy to get caught up in being right, but there's a bigger picture here.
Right. He breaks it down into 6 parts, this art of being agreeable. So first, develop an agreeable mindset. Like, be the kind of person who naturally looks for common ground. Second, actually say it. Say, I agree with you, or you are right, and like, nod your head, make eye contact, all that.
Make it clear you actually agree. You're not just humoring them.
Exactly. Then third, try to avoid disagreeing unless it's like absolutely necessary.
Which, he suggests, is probably a lot less often than we think.
Right. Then fourth, admit when you're wrong. He says people admire this quality.
Yeah, I get that. Being able to say, I messed up, shows humility.
Yeah. Then, number 5, avoid arguments. Even if you think you're totally right, arguments rarely end well. Nobody really wins. And last, number 6, he talks about dealing with what he calls fighters, like people who are looking for an argument. And his advice is basically, don't engage. Just like refuse to fight and they'll eventually give up.
So basically, be a lover, not a fighter.
Yeah. And the whole underlying principle here, he says, is this. People like the people who agree with them. It's just natural, right? And they tend to dislike being disagreed with.
Okay, makes sense. So let's move on. Chapter 5 is how to skillfully listen to people. And he makes a really big claim here, doesn't he?
Yeah, he says the more you listen to people, the smarter and more likable you'll become.
I like that idea. So like, Good listeners are more appealing than good talkers.
Often, yes. Because, again, it comes down to that self-interest thing. When you listen, you're letting people talk about themselves, which they love.
Right.
So he gives 5 rules for good listening.
Okay, lay them on me. What's number 1?
Number 1, look at the speaker. Listen with your eyes, he says.
Makes sense.
2, lean in, show that you're really listening. 3, ask questions. Like, keep them talking. What happened then? Things like that. And then number 4, don't interrupt. Stick to their subject.
Oh, that's a hard one. Sometimes I just want to jump in with my own thoughts.
It is. It takes practice. And then last, rule number 5, stick to their words, You and your, not I and me.
Okay, so these rules, they're all really just about being courteous, aren't they?
Yeah, simple courtesy, but it goes a long way. Okay, next up, we're getting into the territory of influence. Chapter 6, how to skillfully influence people.
Ooh, now we're talking. This is about, like, getting people to do what you want, right?
Kind of, yeah. But it's not about, like, manipulation or anything. He starts by saying that, if you want to influence someone, you first have to understand what's going to motivate them. What do they want?
Figure out what makes them tick.
Yeah. And he really emphasizes that people are different. Like, don't assume that everyone wants what you want.
Yeah, that's a mistake a lot of people make.
Right. So the key is to, like, show them how they can get what they want by doing what you want them to do. It's about alignment.
I like that. Alignment of goals.
Yeah. And he uses this example like an employer who's trying to hire an engineer. Instead of just listing the standard company benefits, figure out what's really important to that engineer. Is it like opportunities for advancement or job security or maybe like continuing education? And then tailor your pitch to that.
So, like, speak their language, appeal to their specific desires.
Exactly. He also talks about it from the other side. Like, if you're the one applying for the job, do your research, figure out what the employer needs and then show them how your skills and experience match up perfectly.
It's all about making that connection. So how do you figure out what people really want?
He's got a 3-pronged approach. Ask, watch, and listen.
Makes sense. Okay, chapter 7. How to skillfully convince people. What's the secret?
Well, he starts with this really interesting point about human nature. He says that people are naturally skeptical of anything that sounds self-serving. If you're like really pushing something that benefits you directly, people's defenses go up.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely experienced that. Like when someone's trying way too hard to sell me something.
Exactly. So he says a much better way to convince people is to like quote someone else or use third-party endorsements.
So, like, let someone else do the convincing for you.
Yeah. Like, if you're trying to sell a product and a customer is worried about its durability, instead of just saying, oh, it's really durable, you might say, I was talking to another customer last week who said they've had theirs for years and it's still going strong.
Right.
It's way more believable coming from someone who doesn't have anything to gain.
It's like the power of word of mouth.
Yeah. Same thing in a job interview, Don't just say you're a hard worker. Mention how your previous bosses always praised your work ethic.
So it's not bragging if someone else is saying it for you.
Right. He also talks about using quotes, success stories, facts, and figures. The idea is to let the evidence speak for itself.
Okay, chapter 8 is all about how to skillfully make up people's minds. And it's not about manipulation, is it? It's more about, like, increasing the odds of agreement.
Exactly. And he lays out 4 methods for doing this. First, give people reasons to say yes. And these reasons should focus on their benefit, not yours. Like, how will they gain by agreeing?
So again, it's about their self-interest.
Right. Second, ask what he calls yes questions, like questions that are naturally answered with a yes. And he even gives a little tip here. Nod your head while you're asking the question and start the question with you. Like, you want what's best for your family, right?
It's all about subtly influencing them.
Yeah. Then, method number 3, give a choice between 2 yeses instead of a yes or no option. Like, instead of asking, can we meet next week, you'd say, would Tuesday or Wednesday be better for you?
I see. So they're more likely to pick one of the options you've given them.
Exactly. And then finally, method number 4, expect them to say yes. He says that a lot of people start out neutral, and your own confidence and expectation can sway them.
It's like the power of positive thinking, but directed outwards.
Yeah, kind of. Okay, moving on to chapter 9, how to skillfully set people's moods. This one's pretty cool.
This sounds like it could be immediately useful.
It is. Giblin says you can make most people like you instantly, like create a good atmosphere in just 1 second.
1 second. What's the trick?
It's all about the first few moments of an interaction, like setting the tone right away.
First impressions, they're huge.
Right. And he talks about what he calls the second basic law of human behavior, which is people tend to respond in kind. So, right when you make eye contact, before you even say a word, smile, like a genuine smile.
It's that simple. Just smile.
Yeah. He says it's almost like magic. People will almost always smile back, and it just sets a more positive tone.
Okay, so smile first, then talk.
Exactly. And, it really does make a difference. You put out positive energy, you get it back. Okay, chapter 10 is about how to skillfully praise people.
Praise. Okay, so this is like emotional nourishment. Right?
Yeah, he says people need that too. Not just physical stuff, but kind words, compliments. So be generous with praise when it's deserved.
But it's got to be sincere, right? You can't just like throw out compliments randomly.
Exactly. And he makes this really important distinction. Praise the act, not the person.
What do you mean?
Like, instead of saying, John, you're such a great employee, say, John, that report you put together was excellent.
Ah, so it's about being specific.
Yeah, it's more impactful. And he even gives this little exercise. He calls it the happiness formula. He says every day, try to say one nice thing to at least 3 different people, and then, pay attention to how it makes you feel.
That's a cool idea.
Okay, so now what about when things aren't going so well? Chapter 11, how to skillfully criticize people.
Ooh, this is a tough one. Nobody likes criticism.
Yeah, but he says the point of criticism should be to make things better, not just to, vent your frustration. So he gives 7 musts for giving criticism successfully.
7. Okay, give them to me.
Number 1, always criticize in private, shut the door, nobody else around.
Makes sense.
2, say something nice first. He actually says, kiss them before you kick them.
Okay, I like that. Soften the blow.
Right. 3, criticize the act, not the person. It's about what they did, not who they are.
That's really important.
Yeah. 4, tell them how to do it right. Don't just point out the mistake. Offer a solution. 5, ask for cooperation, don't demand it. 6, 1 criticism per offense, don't overload them.
1 at a time. Got it.
And then finally, number 7, this is the most important one, he says, end on a friendly note.
Yeah, leave them feeling hopeful, not defeated.
Right. Okay, chapter 12 is how to skillfully thank people.
Gratitude. Important stuff.
Yeah, he emphasizes that it's not enough to just feel grateful. You got to express it. And when you do, people respond well, They're more likely to keep doing good things.
Yeah, it's like you're reinforcing positive behavior.
Exactly. So he talks about the art of saying thank you.
Let's hear it.
Okay, number 1, mean it, be sincere. 2, say it clearly. 3, use a positive tone. 4, look at them. 5, use their name. And 6, look for opportunities to show appreciation, even for little things.
So don't just take things for granted. Make an effort to notice and appreciate.
Yeah. Now, chapter 13 is about how to skillfully make a good impression. And he makes the point that, we have a lot of control over how people see us.
That's an empowering thought, isn't it? We're not just stuck with whatever impression people get.
Right. He emphasizes self-respect, taking pride in who you are and what you do. Don't apologize for yourself. He uses this example of an insurance salesman. And when someone asks, well, what do you do? The guy says, oh, I'm just an insurance peddler. But Giblin's like, no, don't do that. Say it with pride.
Yeah, own it. What are some other tips for making a good impression?
Be sincere. Be enthusiastic. Don't be too anxious, Manage that anxiety. And then 2 big ones. Don't put others down to make yourself look better.
Yeah, that never works.
And then don't criticize or badmouth other people. It just makes you look bad.
Good advice. Okay, let's talk public speaking. Chapter 14, how to skillfully make a talk.
He's got 5 rules here. 1, know what you want to say. Speak with authority. 2, be brief. Get to the point.
I think a lot of speakers need to hear that one. Be brief.
3, look at the audience. 4, talk about what they're interested in, not just what you want to talk about. And then 5, be yourself. Don't try to be some super formal speaker.
Keep it natural.
Right. And then finally, chapter 15, some final thoughts for you.
Hit us with the wisdom.
He reminds us that knowledge is only valuable if you use it, Understanding these principles is great, but you have to actually apply them in your life.
It's all about taking action.
Right. He really emphasizes that. Life rewards action, not just potential.
Yeah.
So he encourages you to, take these insights and actually use them.
Make them a part of how you interact with the world.
Exactly. And so as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question. Out of all these principles we've talked about, which one really resonates with you? What are you facing right now in your life, in your relationships, where these ideas could really make a difference?
Yeah, that's a good one to ponder.
Maybe it's listening or agreeing or influencing. Pick one or two and try them out. See what happens. This isn't just about knowing stuff, it's about doing stuff,
Mm.
Improving your skill with people in a way that actually matters.
Absolutely. Well said.